4th of July is this week. Training camp is just a few weeks away. Chuck Bass and me are going to break down our favorite training camp running back battles on Player Profiler. All right, Chuck, we told the folks in the comments last week that this week would be a patriotic show. We got the 4th of July coming up. Before we start, explain to the viewers where the hell you got that singlet, because that is not something that you just brought on Amazon this week, right?
You guys want the full flex? I bought this for Tomorrow World in Atlanta, Georgia for 2014. Had a few drinks, saw a few things, and now I'm here talking to you guys about running back camp battles.
I love it. I love it. Well, let's get right into our first running back camp battle. So the first battle we're going to talk about is the Cowboys. We have Jerry's Misfits here. Jaydon Blue, Javonte Williams, Miles Sanders. This is an interesting running back room. I don't really know if I want any parts of it. Right now, you have Miles Sanders, who's running back 71 right now. He goes in the late 100s. You have Javonte Williams, who's RB 37, who goes 107, one spot behind Travis Etienne, Chuck. And then you have Jaydon Blue, the rookie, who's RB 47, goes off the board at 137, ahead of Miles Sanders by a good amount. Is there anybody that you expect? Do you have a feel for who you expect to take over in this room? And if you are drafting anybody in this room, which guy would it be?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked both of those questions because this absolutely is a bucket of yuck. It's not exactly that I don't want any part of it because I think there's going to eventually be a lot of value to be had because of how explosive the offense is going to be, because of how strong the run blocking unit of this line is going to be. It's going to be easy for all these guys, and they're all kind of misfits, right? But there's no better running back rehab than running behind the Dallas Cowboys offensive line. Rico Dowdle is a nice player, but 1,000 yards last year, the first undrafted rookie, undrafted Cowboys RB to do that in a very long time. So who are our options? Javonte Williams. It's hard to believe we have 4 years of memories with him, particularly because we don't really even have any memories of him. Like after the injury, he just hasn't been a thing. I think he'll get the nod because I think he's probably coming in with the most momentum just because of how much he was used in a very good Denver Broncos offense last year. Now, he wasn't exactly a key contributor to it, but he was certainly a beneficiary. Top 5 at the position in running back targets. I mean, there's of all the guys that you could squint and make a case for, it's probably him to start the year. After that, I mean, roll the dice. Miles Sanders, can he regain his 2022 form with the Eagles running behind a great offensive line when he was 5th in the league in rushing? Jaydon Blue, Texas product. He's a blazer. Can he come in and do anything other than being a change of pace guy? You tell me. Tell me, Pete.
Yeah, I think you're kind of on the head here. If you were to pay up for any one of these backs, it probably would be Javonte, but I don't really want to. So I'm willing to bite the bullet and say, hey, maybe I'm wrong and it's not Javonte, and take a chance on Miles Sanders at his cost, or even Jaydon Blue. I prefer both guys at their cost. What I would say about Javonte, and you noted it, right? I mean, last year, 52 receptions. He was not good. We know that. 9.3 points per game, 36 in the entire NFL. But when you think about Javonte Williams, and one of the reasons he found himself on the field so much last year was because he's an awesome pass blocker. And what I will say is, if this Cowboys team, and I expect them to throw the football a ton, if this Cowboys team has to throw the football a lot, I expect Javonte to be out there a ton unless Jaydon Blue is just really, really good as a rookie in pass pro. Javonte is one of the best in the NFL at the running back position in pass pro. When you look at their vacated carries, 317 with the loss of Rico Dowdle and some of the other misfits on that team. When you look at Jaydon Blue, his cost, it's starting to dip a little bit, right? It was pre-draft process, April 29th, right around that start. He goes up from, the mid 160s, peaks all the way at 130, and has settled somewhere in the mid 140s, right? Yeah. We take a look at Javonte. I mean, he's had a slow increase over the last few months since April 29th, and he's kind of settling in. And I'm sure there's a possibility that Javante's ADP and his cost could go a little bit higher, maybe.
Mm,
But I mean, I'm thinking, Travis Etienne sits there. I'd prefer taking a chance on Etienne over him.
yeah,
And then we look at Miles Sanders, right? Who, his ADP has gone up significantly. But at the same time, if you're taking Miles Sanders there, I don't think you're really expecting a ton from him. I don't expect a ton from this offense, from a rushing standpoint. Strength of schedule wise, player profiler. If you go ahead and you do purchase that draft kit, I do want to mention that we are doing a July 4th sale on
yeah.
all of the products here at Player Profiler. So go ahead and check that out. We just dropped the draft kit, and it is chock full of great information. Their
Mm,
strength of schedule against the run, though, is 30th, right? It's not
yeah,
a good schedule against the run. They start off the season against the Eagles, and it's a really tough stretch towards the end of the year. You get the Eagles in week 12, Chiefs week 13, Lions week 14. Maybe if they're playing from behind, you're banking on whichever guy ends up being the best pass catcher.
yeah,
And I would probably bet on Javonte just because he's going to be probably likely the best pass protector out of these
yeah.
running backs.
And I think that's the main problem with all this is going to come down to ADP, because I don't think any of these guys is going to be like a top 20 running back at any point. Maybe you get a RB 25, anything like that. So you look at Javonte and you look at the guys going around him, your Charbonnets, your Scadaboos, your Ramondres, your Spears. It's like, okay, I can see all those guys having similar up downs. But then not that far back is Jaydon Blue at RB 44, who could be nothing this year. And he's going around guys like Tootin, Rashad White, Trey Benson, Ray Davis, guys I think are going to have meaningful roles. So if you're gambling on one of these guys, I like the early pick on Williams if you're going to do it, or I like a later pick basically on Sanders, who is going undrafted in best ball drafts, probably will be in redraft drafts as well. As far as like, okay, do I want to wait? Am I impatient and I want the guy now, or do I want to hold off and grab him later? Those are kind of how I think you should play this. Don't get sandwiched in the middle where you potentially lose all the value you have in just one pick.
Yeah, and I think it's kind of beating a dead horse at this point. There's not a ton left to say about this room. It's not super exciting. There could be some value, right,
Who do
from a
you
flex
want? Who do
standpoint.
you want to win this? Best case scenario.
I want Jaydon Blue just because he's got the best upside, right? He's the best athlete right now in the room. I love
Mm,
Javonte Williams. I just don't know what to expect from him at this point. Maybe an extra year removed from all those ligament tears in his knee, ends up being something where maybe he gets an extra year and can bounce back.
mhm,
I would be happy. I would love it genuinely for it to be Javonte,
mm.
but I hope it's Jaydon Blue just because he provides the best upside based on
Yeah.
his skill set and his explosiveness. What about you?
I want Miles Sanders only because week 18 of last year, he had 25.1 points. And so I've seen him do it more recently. Let's get the guy back. Let's just say that his time in Carolina was a sabbatical, and who he truly is that Eagles fraud that we saw in previous seasons.
Well, let's good segue to our next team here. It's going to be the Patriots Union Soldiers. So I tried to make it a little bit of a 4th of July kind of theme, right? Something
Yeah.
patriotic, right? The Union, right? The good guys. And when we look at the this Patriots room, it's Ramondre Stevenson, the veteran, gets extended last year. Trevion Henderson, the young buck who gets
Mm.
drafted this year. And then you have Antonio Gibson, who I don't have a player picture for. He's probably not worth having
Graphicless Gibson on this one.
yeah, it's okay. He's probably not worth having a
Yeah.
graphic for. But looking at their ADPs real quick, Chuck, and I'll pass it to you. You have Henderson right now, a running back 23, ADP is 61. You have Ramondre Stevenson right now, RB 39, ADP
Yeah.
around 110. And then you have Antonio Gibson, who practically goes undrafted in most formats.
Yeah.
What's your thoughts? I mean, do you think they're going to give Stevenson every opportunity to be the starter? Do you think this is more of a 50-50 split in camp? How do you see things shaking out?
This is a fun one because I thought maybe calling this like the Boston Massacre would have been appropriate, but in reality, like I really like both of these ADPs, especially in a Josh McDaniels offense, especially with how the offseason went, the investments they made in the offensive line, structure, personnel wise, coaching staff, everything, right? It just feels good. So Trevion Henderson said that he's been studying James White receiving film, and that's basically all you need to do to get me in on you. on ADP. He's a supremely talented guy. He does everything better than Stevenson will. His ADP is unusual for a player that was taken with the 6th pick in the 2nd round. That's right up there with Breece Hall, and it's ahead of guys like Kenneth Walker, James Cook, even ahead of Jonathan Taylor. He's going around guys like David Montgomery, DeAndre Swift, and ahead of fellow rookies Judkins and Caleb Johnson. And I say all that to say, I just think he's going to be better than all of these guys. I think he's going to get better opportunity. Josh McDaniels, we know he's going to bring a high floor, even if it may not translate to team success overall in year 1. They're going to utilize the running back room as strong as probably just about anybody, at least in the AFC. And that can be said for Ramondre as well. He had a really good start to the year last year, 5 RB1 finishes in his first 8 games, and that was with a foot injury, that was with bad quarterback play, and an offensive line that didn't even really exist. And then it all came crashing down, but it all came crashing down for the whole team. So the fact that they're still relatively high on him with a new staff, all this turnover, high draft rookie, all that stuff, makes me feel like this will be closer to a split. But I still think both of these guys could eat pretty decently.
I think Ramondre is a little mispriced right now, to your point. I think he's going at a pretty good cost at the moment. I don't mind taking a chance on both guys at ADP. I'm with you there. I said it on the Bold Prediction Show. I think there's a real world where Trevion Henderson ends up being, a top 10 running back in fantasy. Now, for that world to happen, I think he needs to really clearly take over this role. But it's not out of the question for him to do so either. When you think about Henderson, he was the best pass blocker in this class, so I think he's going to easily lock up that 3rd down role, in my opinion. And then, I also think about Ramondre Stevenson. He had the fumbling issues, right? And that was a big concern for him. Antonio Gibson's had fumbling issues too. When you look at Trevion Henderson, one thing he was touted for was he didn't fumble in his last 360 carries in college. And so, that's a guy that ball security is job security, right? And he's a player that knows how to hang on to the football. He adds a dynamic element in this offense that I think the offense is missing. They don't have a lot of explosion. I think Stephon Diggs could be, solid. I think he can be solid, but he's not adding an explosive element. The most explosive player is probably Pop Douglas, who a lot of people don't want to talk about. But I think he's got a shot to even be the wide receiver 2 in that offense. But outside of Pop Douglas, there's not a ton of explosion. Kyle Williams is a good athlete too, but just difference making explosion. I think Trevion Henderson adds that element to a team that's drastically going to need that kind of play if they're going to try to win football games.
Yeah, I could not agree more. And you really just lay it out nicely, right? You have this one guy who has the opportunity to be special, and then you have another guy that can raise the floor of the entire room and take pressure off of everybody coming into year 1, right? There's not lofty expectations for this team, but you want to see them get off to the right start. And you have a lot of people who want to prove they have chips on their shoulder, right? Mike Vrabel, chip on your shoulder. Josh McDaniel, chip on your shoulder. Drake May still trying to, separate himself from the Jaden Daniels, Bo Nix, Caleb Williams, I guess. And then Stephon Diggs coming back after, a pretty brutal injury and kind of being cast aside. So you have a lot of guys that I think are going to be working really hard to, kind of push this whole train going forward. And Josh McDaniels, 18 years in New England, they used a 2-back system the whole time. When a guy was supremely talented, he was a rock star, and you probably have to go back to maybe one LeGarrette Blount season or a Corey Dillon season for all my history buffs back there. And those guys feasted, but so did the guys who were swimming in their wake behind them. So these are terrific ADPs. Lock them in.
Yeah, the big concern with this is can the offense take the next step? I've seen a lot of people out there say Drake May is one of the fantasy quarterback steals in this season. But if you really feel that way, now I'm sure some of that has to do with his rushing upside, but I also think you have to believe that the offense takes a step forward. They brought in Will Campbell, they brought in Morgan Moses, so that should help stabilize the tackle positions. They brought in Bradbury from the Vikings. That's nothing to write home about necessarily, but they did do the work to help out that offensive line. And I think it should be much improved. You also bring in Josh McDaniels, which that cannot be ignored. That is a huge, huge upgrade. And for what Josh McDaniels lacks in empathy and, just being a genuine good guy, he makes up for in his, just his ability to just absolutely knows how to fucking call a football game. So I think all that's is a good thing for Drake May. I still think in this offense, I'm taking Trevion Henderson. I don't
Mhm.
really care for Antonio Gibson. He's not a
Yeah.
guy I'm not even really. Maybe if you're trying to get weird in best ball, you'll take a shot at him. But I think if I'm putting my money where my mouth is, I'm
Mhm.
going to bank on Trevion Henderson and the talent. And I think Trevion Henderson takes the opportunity and ends up
Yeah.
being named the starter at the running back position in camp, because I'm gonna say that I think Ramondre Stevenson's gonna struggle a little
Mhm.
bit in camp in terms of when you're looking at the eye test and which player pops on the field more. It's gonna be Henderson, and that talent's gonna be undeniable. And
Yeah.
maybe out of respect to the veteran, they won't announce him being the starter.
Mhm.
It'll be a 1A, 1B kind of thing. But I think we're all gonna really know pretty quickly that Trevion Henderson's gonna be the lead dog in this backfield.
I will say this. Uh, Antonio Gibson has Jonas Gray, like week 8, 4 touchdown potential if one of these guys misses times, but save
Sure.
that for your redraft leagues. I think Ramondre Stevenson will lead the entire country this year. And you're watching the games from like 20 feet away at a bar, and somebody leaks out on like a running back wheel and catches a touchdown in the end zone, and you think it's Henderson, and you go nuts, and it
Hey,
ends up being Stevenson. He will lead the NFL in those reactions for 2025.
I could see it. I can certainly see that, and getting super frustrated. Let's move on to our next room. It's going to be the Bears. Ben's Swift Freedom. Try to get creative with these, but we're gonna look at the Bears here. You have DeAndre Swift, you have Kyle Monangai, and you have Roshan Johnson. And Chuck, lately Roshan Johnson has been getting steamed up a lot. People think he's going to be one of the better values. Then you have obviously DeAndre Swift, who we've seen a lot. He's been a guy that's been overhyped, in his time as a really really good player, and I think he is a very good athlete, but he hasn't really provided that upside that we wanted. RB19 last year. And then you have the rookie out of Rutgers, Kyle Monangai, who people think, in my opinion, he's more of a threat to Roshan than he is Swift, just based on skill sets. But what are your thoughts? Let me read you the ADPs real quick. Swift is RB 26 with an ADP of 76. He's actually up 31 spots, Chuck,
Mhm.
since the NFL draft. And then you also have Roshan, RB 51, goes about 160, up 46 spots since the NFL draft. And then Kyle Monangai, who's practically undrafted. He's a guy that most people just take a flyer on later on.
Yeah, I mean, this one's going to depend on if you've been burned by Swift, if Swift, was a nice value for you at some point, if you think that Ben Johnson can just make any running back a factor, if you like the moves the Bears in the offseason. It's going to depend on a lot more than just like how rational of a person you are, and how much you're capable of taking advantage of what the board looks like. I mean, Swift, RB24, he has never had a season where he finished lower than RB21, and that's playing with under Anthony Lynn, Ben Johnson, Brian Johnson, Shane Waldron, varying offensive lines, usually pretty good ones. But I mean, what he was able to do last year in one of the worst running back situations in the league, a quarterback who didn't know what he was doing, several different offensive coaches and play callers, just nobody on the same page. He probably didn't win you a lot of weeks, but they hit a pretty high floor, and that's what he looks to offer for this year as well. Ben Johnson seems to be bringing a level of stability to this entire offense that I think will be good, maybe not great right off the bat. The only time Swift ever really had a running back mate in his backfield that was significant was Jamal Williams in 2022, 17 touchdowns, elite stuff, don't get me wrong, but it's more or less been his show. If Roshan Johnson looked like somebody I think could play in the NFL, I'd probably be a little bit more bullish on him, especially at his ADP. But I'm not even sure this guy is making the roster on most other teams. And so you take all that aside, then it comes down to Kyle Mongai. And he certainly doesn't have, I think, the physical traits to burst onto the scene, but he's probably the smartest runner in this backfield. He can hit holes, he can hit lanes, he can pick up his assignments, he's patient. So if they're just looking for somebody that can give them maybe a little bit of get this train rolling, right? We talked about the Patriots and getting the momentum going. Nobody needs it more than this Bears offense. And so if they have somebody that can give that to them, kind of like where he's going.
Yeah, Monangai, I would prefer over Roshan Johnson. Roshan Johnson's ADP has started to creep up a little bit. I think, you see him, he was practically going undrafted early on
Mhm.
around the NFL draft. He started to rise. more and more as people saw, just like Swift, they pretty much moved together as
Mhm.
people saw them not add an extra back in the running in the draft outside of Monangai, who wasn't a
Yeah.
high drafted player. And then you also factor in J.K. Dobbins signs in Denver, Nick Chubb signs in Houston. The
Yeah.
bigger veteran running backs that were left on the market did not go there. And so you sit there and you say, you know what? Somebody's got to tote the rock in this Ben Johnson offense. They
Yeah.
improved the offensive line significantly. Vacated targets only 11. Only
Mhm.
11 vacated targets. They're practically retaining the entire running back room from last year. It's a middle of the pack strength of schedule, run schedule, right? Player Profiler has them ranked 18th.
Yeah.
Down the stretch, they play the Eagles week 13. They play the Packers week 14 and the Browns week 15. Packers again week 16 and the San Francisco 49ers week 17. But overall, Chuck, I think you're right with Swift in that he's been a guy that while he hasn't really hit, we have to be able to remove prior seasons biases. Now, it's
Yeah.
important to keep that information, and you can't just completely ignore it. We look at stats all the time from previous years, but with Swift at his current cost, what we've seen is people are out on him, even though he's cheaper than he's ever been. He
Yeah.
gets an offensive coordinator upgrade, right? He's being drafted pretty much at his floor. If you don't think that Roshan or Manungai are going to take over this backfield, he's the RB 26. You just mentioned he's finished as what was it? The lowest in his career was RB 21.
Yeah.
So he's being drafted at his floor right now of what we've seen. And if you don't think that anybody else is going to step up in this room,
Mhm.
Swift feels like the easy call here, no?
I think so because you're like it's about that like Jaden Blue, Javonte Williams thing, right? It's like, hey, do I want a guy that has a pretty finite range of outcomes that I could be acceptable with, or do I want a guy who has a 15% chance of I don't know becoming a top 20 back, but and if he does or doing nothing, right? So let me ask you this because it gets into game theory a little bit. If you draft the RB 24 and he finishes as the RB 19, are you satisfied with that pick? Would you know what I mean?
It's gonna depend on what my roster looks like. If that's my RB3 and
Mhm.
I'm looking for an upside play with Swift, I'd be pretty bummed. If I'm taking,
Yeah.
if I'm taking let's just say I'm taking Omarion Hampton as my
Mhm.
RB2. I say let's just call it I have Devon A. Chain and Omarion Hampton RB1, RB2, right?
Yeah.
There you might be okay with Swift saying, "Hey, you know what? This is a safer play. I know what I'm getting on the floor and there is room for upside," right? And so that's kind of what you might be expecting if he produces a little bit higher than you wanted, great. If those other two guys in front of him that you drafted also produce what you were hoping for, you're
Yeah.
probably satisfied, right? But
Yeah.
we're never satisfied, Chuck. So that's a loaded question, right? I mean, we
It
always
is.
want more. We
It's a
always
tricky
want
one. Like I don't draft Tony Pollard because I think he could be the RB 21 and I'm getting him at RB 28. Like I draft Tony Pollard because I mean after a few beers, I think he could be the RB 9, with a little Cam Ward coming in. So,
Oh,
but I mean, I'm just saying, like, what do you want out of these guys and what do they mean to your roster? Because you don't want to be rearranging deck chairs on the Titanic. Like you want to be swimming.
look, Swift is the ultimate floor play, right? I mean, he's had
Yeah.
40 or more receptions every single season except 2023, where he
Mhm.
had 39. He missed that mark by just one. And you have to assume that he's going to continue to get targets, right? He had
Yeah.
52 last year. I think Roshan and Manungai are going to be, again, everybody keeps saying it, but that David Montgomery role where they'll be the early down backs.
Yeah.
Swift is still going to be an early down back. I'm not saying he won't. I think Swift is going to be the guy that gets most of the burn between the 20s. But then Manungai and Roshan, when you get closer to the end zone, those are
Mhm.
going to be the guys that get utilized a little bit more, or their role will expand
Yeah.
more in that part of the field. But I mean, it's a loaded question. Like I said, it's really it's tough to say. that I guess I would be disappointed, because I'm hopeful that he can do more than just
Yeah.
RB19, but he finishes RB19 last year, and it really just depends on what my guys do ahead of him and what my expectations are. Drafts are fluid, right? I always say, and I'm sure you can attest this as well. Like, you know, we all go into a draft with a plan, but like you have to let the board dictate your decisions at times, right? You
Yeah.
have to be fluid with the board and understand what your league mates are doing. And so again, I might not like DeAndre Swift today, but if I'm on the board and I'm getting hit in the mouth where I keep missing on running backs that I wanted that get picked in front of me, DeAndre Swift after a couple beers starts to look a little bit better.
Ooh, I like that. Does anything not look better after a couple of beers, though? Listeners, drop us in the comments and let us know if that's the case.
Yeah.
Yeah, they don't have a Jamal Williams on this team, guys. No one's taken 17 rushing touchdowns from the 5 to the 10-yard line. Like, I don't know if Swift will be that guy, but I know these other guys aren't. So
Yeah,
kind of
I'm with you, and it's arguably the best offense he's been in. You could say
Mhm.
Philly, at the time, and that's definitely fair. They had a lot of play calling gaffes at the time, and they let go
Yeah.
of their play caller that year he was there. That offensive line was certainly better, but this offensive line is much improved.
Mhm.
Let's move on to our final segment here. It's going to be the Chargers. I put it as Jim's gridiron independence here. You got Jim Harbaugh, who we know what he did at Michigan. We know what he wants to do. He has Greg Roman here. We know he wants to pound the football, Chuck. It's
Yeah.
just a matter of how much is Najee Harris going to be a thorn in the side for Omarion Hampton. Hampton goes as RB15 right now, a pretty high price, but a first round pick, right? He's ADP is 47. Then you have Najee Harris, his running mate, who goes more than double past him as the RB36 with an ADP around 110. Talk to me about this room here with, how do you see it shaking out? Is Najee going to be a guy that takes until week 8 until he really starts to go away?
Mhm.
Or is Hampton going to be a guy that's going to be producing day one for us?
This is a 4th of July show, right? So Amari and Hampton is the colonies, and Najee Harris are the French. And we're taking on the British here. The French were a great ally. They were great in a supporting role. They were crucial to helping us, solidify our place as the next great world superpower. But they were backups in the if we're doing a depth chart, the French were backups. I think Hampton is going to be closer to Genty this year than he's going to be closer to Henderson, closer to Judkins, closer to Caleb Johnson. I mean, his early production seasons at UNC legitimately compared to Christian McCaffrey and Reggie Bush, just smaller known, lesser players. And there's going to be a lot to go around here. Even if Najee gets 130, 140 attempts, which he probably will, because that's what the RB2 gets in a Greg Roman offense. I still think that Hampton is going to be the beast. He's going to be the Dobbins in this offense, who was just tearing defenses apart in 2020. So that would put, Najee closer to like a Mark Ingram type. And there's plenty of room for all these guys. I don't think they're going to ask Herbert to pass like he was under Brandon Staley. I mean, they didn't even do that last year. They solidified the offensive line a little bit more on the interior with Mekhi Becton coming in. They're just making upgrades left and right. But the biggest upgrade is they brought in an elite running back to be able to really, not have to, they were getting rushing production just by sheer volume last year, 12th in attempts. J.K. Dobbins and Gus Edwards were body bags by the time the season got wore down. So you upgrade both of those positions, and I kind of like both of their ADPs, RB17 for Hampton, who could be a potential top 5 player. Najee Harris, RB35, could be a potential top 24 player. I mean, you're just returning value on both these guys.
Yeah, the Podfather Matt is more in line with you. He thinks Hampton can be a league winner. And at his cost, I think it's fair to say he could be a league winner. This is a team that brought in Mekhi Becton, which to help with the protection on that offensive line. They signed Andre James for depth as well. Najee Harris was probably their biggest addition. Gives them, some guys that they can rotate back and forth. And 294 vacated carries. I don't need to sit here and tell you they lost J.K. Dobbins, right? No Gus Edwards, who's still floating around there. Maybe Gus Edwards goes to Chicago. I can see that.
Yeah.
He might be the biggest name left. But when we think about this offense, schedule-wise, they got a tough schedule at the end of the season, Chuck. They play the Eagles in week 14. They play the Chiefs in week 15 in the first week of the playoffs, then the Dallas Cowboys, then the Houston Texans. How much does strength of schedule factor into your draft decisions, Chuck, when you're looking at players on the board come draft day?
It's hard to say just because I mean so much of that ends up being fluid throughout the season. I just try to look at like team tendencies and what they've done and what they want to do. And what they were not very good at last year, and how much they tried to address it. And I mean, the Chargers were, for as much as they tried to run the ball and the identity of Greg Roman and Jim Harbaugh, they were 29th in rushing success rate, 30th in rushing EPA. Like I said, they were just grinding teams down. They were putting Justin Herbert behind the sticks a lot more than I know this offense wants to be. So I just think they'll come out swinging, and bringing Najee Harris in also. I know they signed him first, but having him as that backup means that they're always going to have somebody on the field that can create a positive play. They've got wily veterans who aren't exactly broken down. So, if he can be kind of a better version of what Zeke was for the Patriots in 2023, I think that this team is going to be a burden on the ground for defenses to have to game plan against.
Sure. So I'm looking here at Player Profiler. You can go ahead and get the draft kit there. I'm taking a look at Player Profiler's projections in the draft kit for this offense. They got them penciled in for 17.9 rushing touchdowns this year, 25 passing touchdowns, a total of 2,009 rushing yards, Chuck. That is a pretty high number for the rushing yards. Now, Justin Herbert, we know he has the legs, and we know he's going to run for some touchdowns. Last year, Justin Herbert ran for 2. I'd say that's probably pretty fair to what to expect this year. Maybe 2, 4 max, but I would say probably 2 to 3 is what to expect. So let's just chop off 2 touchdowns from that 18 that's projected from Player Profiler. That leaves us with 16 touchdowns left. If you had to tell us today who has, what is the touchdown distribution between Najee Harris and Omarion Hampton between those 16 touchdowns left? How do you think that shakes out?
I'll probably say like 11-5 in favor of Hampton. Just feels right. Just feels like he's just so big. He's so fast. He's so good out of the backfield catching balls. And Harris isn't bad at any of these things either. But I think this team has made it pretty clear with this Hampton pick that they don't want to be good. They want to be great. They'll settle for good if they need a guy on the field at third down or wind out the second quarter. But otherwise, it's going to be superstar status for our UNC boy, our Unk.
Man, those pictures of him, the camera guy deserves a raise. Whoever does the PR, because that angle of him shaking Harbaugh's hand, was insane. Because he is not that big. He's big, but he's not. I don't think he's much taller than Harbaugh, but he looked like a mammoth shaking his hand. It's gonna be fun. Final prediction here: Najee Harris, Omarion Hampton. I'm gonna sit here and say that Najee finishes as the RB 25. And I think Omarion Hampton finishes. I'm going to say he finishes as the RB 14, Chuck. What about you?
Man, hell yeah! I'll take that. I'll take that all damn day, because that means that Najee's getting paid in the offseason. He's going to another team next year who's going to feature him as an RB1, and then he'll disappoint us again. But not this year.
We'll see. But that's going to do it for us, guys. Hey, if you guys enjoyed the show, we tried to pull out a little bit more stops today. If you like the outfits, let us know whose outfit you prefer, mine or Chuck's. If you have any ideas, great ideas about what we should do next, or, some funny outfits that we can come out in for another show, let us know in the comments. If you think we look like absolute dipshits, feel free to let us know as well. Enjoy the holiday, and we'll see you guys next time.